So today we're going to be learning about carbon and the molecular diversity of life. Okay, so the term organic chemistry essentially means the study of carbon compounds. And carbon is really important, and the path that carbon takes is it first enters the biosphere, and then plants use the solar energy to transform carbon dioxide or CO2 into life molecules. And then plants or animals that eat plants like herbivores or omnivores take it in. And carbon forms large, complex, and varied molecules. And because of its structure and properties, it accounts for a lot of variety and diversity in the environment. And so this picture on the bottom right is a picture of carbon, and it can bond to 4 other atoms, which lets it have a lot of variety, and we will talk more about this in a few slides. Okay, so the chemical history of carbon. Well, at first, scientists thought that organic compounds only arose in living organisms in a life force beyond chemical and physical laws. And then a scientist by the name Friedrich Wohler tried to make synthetic inorganic salt by combining ammonium ions and cyanate ions. And instead, he made urea, which is a compound present in animal urine. And this surprised them because they didn't think that chemical reactions happened in organisms. And so this experiment supported the view that physical and chemical laws govern the processes of life. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the electron configuration of carbon. So carbon has 6 electrons, 2 of which are in the first shell and 4 are in the second shell. So that means it has 4 valence electrons. So carbon, as you can see in the first group, it can have a single bond to just 4 other elements, such as CH4, or also known as methane. Or it could also have another tetrahedral group with all single bonds, such as ethane. And in the last group, it can also have a double bond with carbon, and this creates this flat molecule. And if you notice, all of these carbons are attached to hydrogens, and this is because carbon most often attaches bonds to hydrogen, oxygen, or nitrogen. Okay, so now we're going to go over the molecular diversity of carbon. So there are different types of carbon molecules. So the first group is hydrocarbons, and like the name suggests, these are organic molecules that are made of carbon and hydrogen. And hydrocarbons are the main compounds of petroleum, which is a fossil fuel. And then they also make up the tails of fats, like in the picture. And so yeah, fats have hydrocarbon tails. And they are also hydrophobic, which for the fats, that's important for the cell membrane. Okay, and the second group is isomers. So isomers are compounds that have the same number of atoms and the same elements, but they have different structures. And so there's different types of isomers. There are structural isomers, which differ in covalent arrangements. There are cis-trans isomers, which differ in spatial arrangements. There's enantiomers, which differ in shape because of the presence of an asymmetric carbon. So now we're going to talk about more of these isomers. So the top left picture is an example of a structural isomer, So as you can see, pentane on the left, it just has a one strand of carbon, versus 2-methylbutane has a carbon branched out like a T almost. And then this middle picture on the left is a cis isomer because the two X's are on the same side, and on the right is the trans isomer because the two X's are on opposite sides. And cis-trans isomers are really important because, for example, in the biochemistry of vision involves a light-induced change of retinol, which is a chemical compound found in the eye, and it goes from the cis isomer to the trans isomer. And then the bottom left picture, we have, as you can see, they're the same element, or the same compound, just mirrored. It's like a mirror image, so you can think of it as like your left and right hand. And the concept of enantiomers is important in the pharmaceutical industry because the two enantiomers of a drug may not be equally effective, and this is seen in ibuprofen and the asthma medication albuterol. Okay, so on the picture on the left, this is a picture of estradiol, which is an example of, which is part of estrogen, and there's testosterone, which is testosterone, and they're both steroids, organic molecules with a common carbon skeleton in the form of 4 fused rings, so this yellow structure, but they differ in chemical groups attached to the rings, so these are highlighted in blue. And chemical groups affect molecular shape and function. And an example, a type of chemical group is also called a functional group. And functional groups are directly involved in the chemical reactions, and they each have certain properties like shape and charge that cause it to participate in chemical reactions in a characteristic way. So here are the 7 most important chemical groups. So hydroxyl, carbonyl, carboxyl, amino, sulfhydryl, phosphate, and methyl. So the first 6 up to phosphate are or can be chemically reactive. And all of these except for number 5, sulfhydryl, are also hydrophilic, so that means water-loving, and therefore they increase the solubility of organic compounds in water. And then number 7, methyl, is not chemically reactive, but it serves as a recognizable tag on biological molecules. Okay, so now we're going to briefly talk about ATP. We will cover this more in depth in a later lesson. But ATP stands for adenosine triphosphate, and what it is it's an organic molecule, adenosine, that is attached to a string of 3 phosphate groups. So the top picture is the structure of ATP. And ATP stores the potential to react with water. When one phosphate group breaks off, the reaction releases energy that is used in the cell, and then therefore there's 2 phosphate groups left, so it becomes adenosine diphosphate, also known as ADP. So this picture in the middle is a diagram of this reaction. So we have ATP, and it reacts with water, and as you can see, there's a inorganic phosphate that breaks off, and you're left with ADP and energy. Okay, so make sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed this, and and don't miss out on our future lessons. You follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn. Our username is @STEM_Youth. You can also join our Discord. The code is on the screen, and the link will also be in the description. And if you have any questions, email us at stemenrichmentyouth@gmail.com.